Cast. I wanted to tell you all, I wanted to talk to you today about long held traditions, where they come from, why we continue with them, and what makes us so willing to continue on with traditions that aren't necessarily relevant or aren't productive or helpful anymore. So, traditions, I've been having some really terrific conversations about traditions that started with an article that I read about a young lady who, when they cooked their Thanksgiving turkey every year, they sliced off the top of the turkey and cooked it separate than the bottom of the turkey. And finally, she brought up in, to her mother and her grandmother, and the response was, "Well, that's just what's always been done." And so by the time it got to the grandmother said, "Well, my mom, when I was a child, we would cook the turkey, but we had a really small oven. So the only way that we could cook the turkey was to chop off the top of it and cook the two pieces separate." And that was such a surprise to them. And I just was so tickled by that, because there are so many things that we do that we just do them because it's accepted in our family or in our culture or in our business, or in our organizations. I mean, this is prevalent everywhere, that we just do things because it's what's been done before. And I just recently had another conversation, triggered by all of these ideas about different traditions that people have. Was a friend of mine's, her mother would take her bank statements every month and write them out separately in a separate notebook. And it was such a profound thing, because in her generation, there were probably multiple reasons. Like, we don't know why she actually did that, but there were multiple reasons. Maybe at the time they didn't have access to the kind of information that we have today, obviously, because it was probably in the early 1900s. But the other element is, why you would continue doing it today, because it's just always what you've been taught that should be done. And sometimes we feel disloyal to the people that we love, to our teachers, to those who have taught us everything that we know. We feel disloyal to them when we question why things are done the way that they are. So I wanted to read a little excerpt. I touch on this topic in my book, Conquer Your Karmic Relationships. And again, notice my nice Kleenex as a page holder. But this is a really important topic, that in any relationship, we have to really organize in our mind what traditions are suitable for today and to be carried on into the future. So the chapter's called The Slayer's Motto: I carry on the traditions that make sense. The family traditions, relationship habits, and personal behaviors that guide our lives were all created at some point for our safety, survival, or a belief that was held for our well-being, whether or not they were born of an absolute truth or just something we believed suited us for a period of time. As we grow and expand our understanding of our world, our power in it, and our humanity, these same traditions become outdated and our circumstances change. Having said that, it's common for our community, friends, or family to consider us disloyal at the prospect of changing those same traditions, habits, and behaviors. Peer pressure is one of the main reasons people don't change, but change we must. It is an inherent part of life. So, hi, Rameez, nice to see you. I really wanted to address, if anybody's out there watching, do you have any traditions in your family that you don't know where they came from? You don't have to give the long version, but when we think of traditions, there are always, traditions can also be reactions, behaviors, or beliefs about ourselves or others, beliefs about other cultures, or about other countries or places, things that we may not know about, and we only have a limited amount of information. We also learn a lot of about our traditions in the history books, and history books that may not have been written by people who are like us. So it's really important that we consider not only where our traditions come from, but our willingness to question them and to recognize that there are times in life when traditions come up to be changed and that they should be changed. And that's a part of how we all move forward together. So, trying to think of any traditions that we have in my family. Um, well, my tradition, the traditions, the traditions in my family were to not talk about it. So we can see I did something a little different with that. My next week's topic is going to be airing your dirty laundry, because that was another thing that sparked this idea on traditions, was that we have this idea that we just should not talk about to other people or other people outside our circle or outside our family about what we call our dirty laundry, which essentially is some of our deepest heartfelt longings, experiences, or traumas. And how can we process through and work through our traumas if we don't give ourselves permission to speak about them? It's part of the reason why mental health in our world, and definitely in our country, it's definitely why many people in our country do not feel free to speak openly about what hurts them the most. And because we haven't created a culture yet of freedom of speech, true freedom of speech, not freedom of speech to get you to do what I want you to do, but the kind of freedom of speech that says, I have a right to have the feelings that I'm having, and I want to feel them and express them. Right? It's not the idea of expressing your emotion is so that you can work through it and process it. And doing that in public allows for you to create or connect with your milieu who also feels the same way, and that you can all process it out and find a way to find a common ground. That's ultimately why we have communication, is so that we can get a common ground with one another. I want to read another little section, and this has to do more with understanding the karma of culture and tradition. How things begin and what they become are often unique. Cultural customs and traditions have been the storytellers for centuries past, the guides to offer those who follow them insights on history and ways of living. From fairy tales, creation stories, songs, and dances, to media outlets, television programs, radio shows, and the internet. But that often begins as a vehicle for well-meaning education, becomes a method to embolden those who seek power in attempting to control others, whether it be justified or not. So oftentimes we relate to our freedom of speech, we relate to it as a vehicle to ultimately get others to be swayed in following our ideas and our beliefs and our trends. And we see that all the time in advertising. The more somebody says something emphatically over and over as if it is the truth, we on a whole, we tend to begin to believe that. And we are living in a time where people now, we all have to lean on our own understanding. We have to be free to talk about our understanding without entering into, this is what you should do, and this is what should happen. Right? Everybody has to get to a point where they're going to do what they're going to do. And ultimately, they have got to be the ones to make a choice for the good of the whole and not just their small circle. That's ultimately, we are all interconnected, and we are all learning how to find a common ground with one another in the way we communicate, in the way we feel, in the way we express our culture and our traditions. And a way of finding acceptance and compassion for ourselves and other people. So that's my chat cast today. If anybody has any questions, we have Ramiz who's asking me when I'm going to talk about feminism, which I will definitely talk about feminism. I will touch on the idea of feminism today because, I don't consider myself a feminist, because I believe we all are equal. We all have something to contribute that is equally valuable in the world, regardless of our gender, regardless of our sexual orientation, regardless of our skin color or our culture. We all have something to contribute. And that doesn't in any way diminish the feminist movement of women supporting women and women recognizing that there is a cultural, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but there's a cultural disparity in how women are paid compared to men. I mean, there's a lot of things that still need to be addressed. My goal is when I treat myself and others equally, eventually that energy is going to be the pervasive energy, and it will hopefully shift hearts and minds. So that's how I address that. And I'm sure that's a much bigger topic that I can address in another chat cast. So Stephen says, a lot of times with traditions, I am drawn to it for a sort of nostalgic view of the past, especially around holidays, like hanging up stockings. What is that? But it makes me feel like a kid again. Yes. So absolutely. I think that, so one of those for me is eating popcorn. Popcorn is not good for me, but I'll be darned if I won't make a pot of popcorn. And I still do it myself. I don't get the microwave stuff. I like to cook it myself, but I will make that popcorn because it reminds me of my dad, who died at age 11. So it reminds me of a time when I lived with the illusion of security. I lived with the illusion of togetherness and family. I don't know that those things necessarily changed for me, but my perspective of them changed, and my relationship, I began to hear of and be clued into that there were people who didn't have security, and now I was starting to feel insecurity not having a man in the family. And this was still, my mom and dad were born in the 30s and grew up in the 50s. That was the 50s and 60s when they were having their kids. So, I think that when we are nostalgic, we relate to a period of time that connects to our level of awareness at the time. And especially in childhood, for some people that's a positive thing, and for some people it's not a positive thing. But we can recollect a part of ourselves or a time in our life when we felt peaceful and safe and comfortable. I guarantee you, every time you look back into your traditions and the ones you like the most and the ones that you hold dearest to you, it's because they reawaken in you that feeling of safety, that feeling of love, that feeling of interconnectedness with your family or your culture. So those are all your connections that will be reawakened in you with tradition. So do you need that tradition in order to reawaken that ultimate idea of safety and security, or whatever joy, whatever it brings to you? Do you need that same tradition? Can you get that same experience or feeling by creating a new tradition? That is the question on deck, people, and I don't have an answer for you on that. Okay, so Melanie says, are those fairy bells going off in your house? What that is, God bless her, my cat. Yes, those are the fairies. They're all around and like ding, 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 ding. You're like, yes, yes. Actually, I have a cat. She's standing at the door and she wants in, and I've given her little bells at the door that she can knock on so that she doesn't have to rip my what is it called? My screen. So she doesn't have to rip my screen to shreds with her cute little nails. That's what you heard. So anyway, and she's so precious. I always feel bad when I can't get up immediately. She was just like, what do you mean you're still sitting there? How dare you? Anyway, that was one tradition down today because I did not get up. Screen door. That was it. Yes. So this has been some wonderful input for everyone today. Again, if you are interested in conquer your karmic relationships, heal spiritual trauma to open your heart and restore your soul, there's it's a manual for living today in all the unique connections that we are needing to make for ourselves and with others. And it's really been a pleasure, as always, to talk with you about questioning your long-held traditions. This is Tracee Dunblazier, and this has been Chatcast. Have a terrific weekend.